When Laura Ingalls Wilder ended her Little House series in 1943, she gave her fictional counterpart, Laura Ingalls, a happy ending. We'll discuss this later on in the semester, but as most of you probably already know, Laura marries the manly and capable bachelor, Almanzo Wilder. And in the closing scene of the novel, These Happy Golden Years, which is set in Dakota Territory in 1885, she and her new husband sit outside on the front steps as evening falls. Laura's heart was full of happiness. All this was theirs. Their own horses, their own cow, their own claim. The many leaves of their little trees rustle softly in the gentle breeze. Twilight faded as the little stars went out and the moon rose and floated upward. Its silvery light flooded the sky and the prairie. "It's a wonderful night," Almanzo said. "It's a beautiful world," Laura answered, and in memory she heard the voice of Pa's fiddle and the echo of a song. Golden years are passing by, these happy golden years. But for the real Laura Ingalls Wilder, happily ever after didn't come on the Dakota prairies. That came here, in the Ozarks, where Wilder once observed, "The sky is lower here." She made her home in the Ozarks from 1894 until 1957, when she died at her beloved Rocky Ridge farm just outside Mansfield, where we're filming today. So what brought Wilder to the Ozarks? Why did the real Laura Ingalls Wilder abandon the big sky and endless Dakota prairie and trade them for a white farmhouse and a steep gulch, where, as Wilder later wrote, tall oaks grow and dogwoods and redbuds bloom in the spring? The truth was that a relentless series of financial losses and personal tragedies plagued Wilder and Almanzo during the first 9 years of their marriage. Crop failures, debt, drought, disease, even fire. We'll fully discuss this period of Wilder's life later in the semester in conjunction with her novel, The First 4 Years, which was published 14 years after her death. But for now, we'll focus on just one of those tragedies that struck the young married couple during those difficult years. In 1888, Wilder and Almanzo, or Manly, as Wilder called him, developed diphtheria. Although they both recovered, Manly, driven by worries about debt and the fate of their farm, defied doctors' orders, got too busy, and suffered a stroke. One cold morning, he nearly fell as he got out of bed because he could not use his legs properly, Wilder wrote. Manly was just 31 years old. From that day on, she remembered, there was a struggle to keep Manly's legs so he could use them. Some days they were better, and again they were worse, but gradually they improved until he could go about his usual business if he was careful. One of the few bright spots in the couple's life during those first bleak years in Dakota Territory was the birth of their daughter, Rose, on December 5th, 1886. She was not quite 2 years old when Manly suffered the stroke, but she remembered that period of her life vividly. "My father," she recalled, "limped through the rest of his 90 years and was never as strong as he had been." After years of personal and financial loss, including the death of an infant son in 1889, Wilder and her husband had had enough of Dakota Territory. They decided to try Florida. As you can see here, Wilder doesn't look especially happy in their new home. "We went to live in the piney woods of Florida," Wilder wrote much later, "where the trees always murmur, where the butterflies are enormous, where plants that eat insects grow in moist places, and alligators inhabit the slowly moving waters of the rivers. But at that time and in that place, a Yankee woman was more of a curiosity than any of these." Wilder apparently took to carrying a revolver with her. They endured Florida for less than a year, returned to South Dakota only briefly, then set their sights on Missouri, or as Wilder called it, the land of the Big Red Apple. Family acquaintances in DeSmet, South Dakota came back from a visit to the Ozarks with glowing reports of abundant orchards and bountiful farms. With a $100 bill as down payment to buy the farm of their dreams, Wilder and Manley set off for the Ozarks in a two-seated hack on July 17, 1894. "We brought all our belongings," Wilder later told a reporter. "One bed spring, a feather mattress, piecework quilts, pots and pans, a skillet, coffee pot, and a little homemade cupboard." They also traveled with a hen coop of Wilder's beloved Leghorn hens. Wilder was 27 years old, Manley 10 years her senior, and Rose was 7. Wilder, however, managed to pack away 2 luxuries on this trip: her portable writing desk, which Manley had made for her, and her pearl-handled pen. She used them almost every day to keep a travel diary in this 4-inch by 6.5-inch notebook from the Mutual Life Insurance Company of New York. This diary was published 5 years after Wilder's death as On the Way Home. I encourage you to read it if you're not familiar with the book. As she was writing this journal, she had no idea, of course, that it would ever be published. Still, Wilder's natural talents as a writer emerge in this diary. She already knew how to create miniature scenes with vivid details, colorful dialogue, and memorable characterizations. As her earliest piece of sustained writing, the diary demonstrates the unique skills she would later bring to her work, first as a journalist, then as a novelist. Clearly, Wilder knew how to write, even when she was writing for an audience of 1, herself. Here, for example, Wilder records what happened when she met a South Dakota family on the road, returning from a very unhappy 10-day sojourn in Taney County, Missouri. Notice the dialogue. "They would not live in Missouri if you gave them the whole of it. Why, hardly any of the houses have windows in them, just holes, and lots of the women have never seen a railroad train nor an organ, and the land is awful stony." This from July 26, 1894. Later, the Wilders met another family who had given up on the Ozarks after 2 months, and Wilder recorded another vivid piece of dialogue. "Right there's the place to go if a man wants to bury himself from the world and live on hoe cake and clabber," the man said. These characters and their dialogue could have come straight out of a short story or a novel. In 1894, Wilder was already thinking like a novelist. Wilder's personality and sense of humor also emerge in this diary. Here, for example, "I went to a house to buy milk. It was swarming with children and pigs. They looked a good deal alike." This, July 19, 1894. Despite the grim reports Wilder and Manley heard from fellow travelers about the Ozarks, they never lost faith in the land of the Big Red Apple. And as Wilder and her family reached the Ozarks at last, the descriptions in her diary become more vivid and lyrical, like this one. "We passed along the foot of some hills and could look up at their sides. The trees and rocks are lovely. Manley said we could almost live on the looks of them." 3 days later, they arrived in Springfield, Missouri. Wilder was impressed. It is a thriving city with fine houses and 4 business blocks stand around a town square. It has 21,850 inhabitants and is the nicest city we have seen yet. It is simply grand. They were so impressed with Springfield that they decided to stay a while and do some shopping. Wilder wrote that "we bought shoes for Rose and myself, a calico dress for me, and a new hat for Manley." They left that afternoon. And as they went deeper into the Ozarks, Wilder was even more impressed with what she saw. The road goes uphill and down, and it is rutted and dusty and stony, but every turn of the wheel changes our view of the woods and hills. The sky seems lower here, and it is the softest blue. The distances in the valleys are blue wherever you see them. It is a drowsy country that makes you feel wide awake and alive, but somehow contented. They arrived in Mansfield, Missouri the next day and decided that Mansfield is a good town. There is everything here already that one could want. A month later, on September 21st, 1894, the Wilders bought the first 40 acres of what would become Rocky Ridge Farm. Wilder later recalled that there was a one-room log cabin. It had no window, but light filtered in between the logs where the chinking had fallen out. So did the wind and rain. The property had a year-round spring and 400 young apple trees waiting to be planted properly. 17 years later, when Wilder began her career as a columnist and editor for the Missouri Ruralist, she often wrote about her memories of those early years at Rocky Ridge Farm. The work during the years was grueling. To appreciate fully the reason why we named our place Rocky Ridge Farm, it should have been seen at the time of the christening. It was and is uncompromisingly ridgy land, on the very tip-top of the ridge at that, within a very few miles of the highest point in the Ozarks. Wilder and Manley spent the first year clearing the land. They lived on income from Wilder's hens and by selling off timber. During their first spring at Rocky Ridge Farm, they planted their apple trees and added a room to the log cabin.